And now, insurance-minded speeches from Geico.
It's a common expression, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. However, what if the horse's mouth is filled with useful insurance tools? This is the exact case with the Geico app. Yes, the app is free and therefore a gift horse. However, look inside the app and behold, emergency roadside assistance, digital ID cards, bill pay. Get the Geico app. Look it in the mouth. Get amazing services. Thank you.
Blog Talk Radio.
And now a sneak peek of the three-night special investigation. Is O.J. innocent? The missing evidence.
I found this knife inside that public storage facility. I believe this is the weapon that killed Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman.
When Bill said he had the murder weapon and I saw the knife, I'm like, wow. The fact that that was in that storage locker that Bill uncovered was amazing to me.
I want you to pull it out and look at it at this point. When we measured it, it fit perfectly with what the medical examiner had told us of the laceration sustained by Nicole. Now, you notice the one thing that I haven't done in the period of time of having this knife, I never allowed anybody to open the stitching because I felt possibly there may be some blood inside.
This is an elaborate story. There's a lot of people out there that aren't going to believe it. How do we address it?
With facts.
And if the facts don't line up, we're going to call it as we see it.
I want the truth, and I think that's what the general public wants. They want the truth for a change, and I think we're in a position to give it to them.
Clearly, there's some unanswered questions both the victims and the families deserve to have answered, and that's what Chris and I are here to do. We're here to look at it with a fresh set of eyes, weed through all the bull, and figure out what we have. I was ready to go right that second and start working on it.
The team is meeting with Mark Taylor, a forensic scientist at one of the top private forensic labs in Southern California. The lab will examine the knife and its sheath for microscopic amounts of blood. If they find anything, they can use DNA testing to see if this blood belongs to Nicole Brown Simpson, Ronald Goldman, or persons unknown.
Set it down there. The presumptive test we used allows us a very sensitive color test. It's very quick, and so we can determine quite quickly if something is blood. If we get a positive, then we have to do additional tests, of course, to determine if it's human blood. So.
How long would you be able to detect blood in that sheath in its current condition right now? How long would the blood actually last?
If it's been stored dry for tens of years, 10, 20, 30 years, not a problem. You'll be able to get detection from it. If bacteria grow on it, you'll end up with them feeding on the blood, and they can destroy the DNA in it and destroy the ability to detect the blood, too. Negative. That one's negative, so we didn't detect anything on that, so.
The one thing that I made a point of never doing is open the sheath of the knife, because if they pull blood off the sheath, it would be another piece to the puzzle falling into place.
As you might imagine, threads are a really good area to trap blood because it's very difficult to wash it out of the thread material. So. Something.
Yeah.
So there was a color change on that one. It's a positive reaction, something that just came up. We'll do additional testing to try to determine whether it is blood or not, and then we'll see if we can isolate DNA from the material in it.
Getting a positive hit on Jason's knife was huge. For all we know, the blood could belong to Ron and Nicole. If we can link this knife to the murders, that's a real game changer. We could solve this case.
There's something here, and This deserves a complete and thorough investigation.
Is O.J. innocent? The missing evidence. The three-night special investigation begins Sunday, January 15th at 9, only on Investigation Discovery.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the King Jordan Radio Show for January 12th, 2017, Season 5, Episode 18. And tonight is a special edition as we're going to look back and break down the top 5 trials and news stories of a death investigator. Ladies and gentlemen, he is also a forensic expert, an author of a book. We're going to go over 5 top cases that he's been involved with, whether covering it or whatnot. Joseph Scott Morgan joins us here on King Jordan Radio. Good evening, Joseph. How are you?
Hey, Jordan. How are you doing, my friend? And hey to everybody in the audience. It's great to be with you.
Absolutely. And you heard the intro for this Sunday with OJ. Is OJ Innocent? A new premiere series. And what do you think? Is this a lot of much ado about nothing, or is it something to keep your eyes peeled on?
I don't know. I think that probably, like with many things, it's driven by what the zeitgeist is right now in media.
Right.
You know, if you remember, I think last year we talked about it. I think even on the air about how the knife was recovered at the cop's house and that sort of thing. And then recently we had the several programs that have come out about JonBenet. And listen, just so the audience understands, if you think for 2 seconds that producers are altruist and they're trying to help mankind, I got a dose of reality for you. They're seeing a way to generate money for this, and the JonBenet thing hit with such force, I think, and you couple that with Making a Murderer, and it's just a natural evolution to go on to O.J. Simpson. Now, whether or not anything will come of this, I don't know. I think that it's good from the sense that it'll get people talking about things and maybe raise awareness relative to areas that I'm interested in, which is forensic science and DNA. But beyond that, I don't think that there's going to be any new revelations.
And it's crazy to think that the alleged crime happened in June of 1994, 23 years ago, and people are still fascinated by this one case that will live in history.
They are. And, you know, the same could be said about JonBenet. There are a lot of, and I've said this before, and, you know, I feel very passionately about this, Jordan. There are a lot of sad cases about little children that have died over the years under horrible circumstances that led that were just in living hells in their collective hells in their home life, and they never got into the news. There's never been over 20 books written about them, but their deaths are just as tragic. And we can go from one sorrow to the next. It's just one of those things that it's kind of like, you go back to Victorian England and people, were fascinated by Jack the Ripper. We're still fascinated by Jack the Ripper even to this day. There's just something that captures people's imagination about these sensationalistic cases that just hang in our consciousness.
Yes, and people have said it's like seeing a car accident. Everybody stops and sees what's going on, and so it's like an oddity, if you will, as was the O.J. Simpson case. You had everything from sex, from drugs, from killing to romance. It was the first mini movie, if you will, that wasn't even meant to be a movie. and I think the audience just got so captured with it, and that what's led to the other trials, as you mentioned, John Bonet. Actually, it wasn't a trial, but it was a case that was unsolved. You had your Jodi Ariases, and you had your Casey Anthony's, and much more. So, you know, OJ did set that up for that. But, you know, the guy from TMZ, Harvey Levin, said, and I quote, "I have never seen a more guiltier person in my life." And that's over 45 years of covering trials. This Harvey Levin from TMZ said that he, you know, he's open to the show, but he's never seen a more guiltier person than O.J. Simpson. So, that is somewhere.
And, you know, the universe has a way of, and I think everybody in the audience can identify with this, and if you're going through a hard time right now because of somebody in your life, trust me, guys, you know, the universe, I believe in the golden rule, and I believe also in karma. You know, the way you treat folks, you're going to be treated like that. It might not come immediately, but, you know, you think about where OJ is today, and he is in a horrible place. And it just, you know, his arrogance got the best of him. So I don't know. I really don't. It'll be entertainment. I would tell anybody that's interested in true crime to view it, but also view it understanding that the producers want you to view it. You know, they want to create, they want to gin up things, and please don't think that they're being altruistic here and trying to help their fellow man.
Right. No, there's definitely no question about that. And if you do want to catch it, it'll be Sunday night on the ID Network at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Now, I guess you were interviewed that you posted recently. Why don't you share that with the audience?
The interview with, which interview are you referring to, Jordan?
I believe it's Death Investigation in America.
That's actually, that's actually an article that I wrote. Thanks for bringing that up.
Oh, okay.
It's actually kind of a more expansive thing. That article just dropped today. You can find it on crimeonline.com, and that's Nancy Grace's new website, her new media platform that is going to be fantastic. This thing has launched just this week. She's got a lot of contributors. I'm going to be doing things on there relative to forensic science and kind of my area of expertise, but you've got celebrity crime. You've got family crime. She's dedicating a huge section of her website to missing children, which I'm a big fan of. There's a big link on there for the Class Foundation, for Polly Class's, the foundation that Polly Class's dad runs, and those in the audience will remember Mr. Class would come on Nancy's show periodically and talk, and a very worthy organization. And she's covering all realms of crime, and it's done in, you know, Nancy Grace's style. It's in your face. She's not holding anything back, and she's not just covering these high-profile cases like a John Bonet case. She's actually talking about these cases that are out there that are among the people like you and I, you know, the every common day folks that are just out there just living their life, and horrible things happen to them. And look, I talked to many of the folks that are listening, and we've talked over the years and the months, and I know that there is a big gap that is void right now in the area of true crime, and particularly people miss court TV. I'm saying to you guys, get out there, support this website, support what Nancy's doing. Trust me, wink, wink, nod, nod. You never know where this is going to go, and I can't say any more than that at this point. But get out there, push, push, push. And, she's already got, if you go to Nancy's Facebook page, she's got well in excess of 2.5 million followers on there. It's one of the largest
yes.
true crime platforms on Facebook of anywhere. Okay, and it is that's being folded over into Crime Online. So she'll put these articles out there on her Facebook page, which is very substantial, blasting it out through social media. I ask that you guys support me in pushing articles out and that sort of thing. I'll repost my article from today and ask you guys to tweet it and, just and pass it along to people. And I'll also pull other articles off of there that kind of tickle my fancy and put those up there. But let's get out there and support this. And you guys have this is something that you guys have an opportunity. I've had so many people over the years since I've been involved in things with HLN and CNN. Who do we talk to? What do we do? What do we do to try to get Court TV back and to try to get these trials? Guys, this is the first step, and you actually have the ability to form the future relative to true crime, and you can do it through social media. And I truly encourage you in doing this.
Yeah, we should have the Netflix of crime maybe in the upcoming months and years, maybe. So that could be interesting.
I'm sure that some platform like that is going to exist at some point in time. The article that I wrote today actually, or that was posted today, actually has to do with the status of death investigation systems in America, and I talk about a case that everybody is aware of that was in our conscience earlier this past year, and that was the death of Justice Scalia, and how there was no official that actually went out to the scene to examine his body. They don't have coroners in Texas. The Justice of the Peace acts as the de facto coroner. And Jordan, Justice Scalia, who, like all the other Supreme Court justices, arguably some of the most powerful people in America, his death, the Justice of the Peace pronounced him dead over the phone.
Wow.
Let that sink in just for a second. Over the phone, he was pronounced dead, and that's allowed by law in Texas. Now, I'm not saying that there is any foul play involved in Justice Scalia's death, but there's an axiom that we use in death investigation, and everybody needs to kind of, really grasp hold of this concept. The idea is this: the most difficult death to investigate, and the thing that your feet are going to be held to the fire most out of all the five manners of death, is a homicide. So the axiom that we use, and many of you guys have heard this on shows and that sort of thing, is that every death, not some deaths, not a few deaths, but every death is a homicide until proven otherwise. And what that means is that as a death investigator, if I walk through the door at a scene and I walk in haphazardly, just making wild assumptions that, this is an 85-year-old grandma that's got a history of heart disease, there's her pills and medications, and I just assume that everything is as it appears. I don't treat that scene with the utmost respect. And suddenly, when I go to examine her body, and I haven't taken photos, I haven't done measurements or anything, just working on an assumption, I roll her body over, lift up her nightgown, and she's got 3 stab wounds in her side. And the reason I tell you that specifically, Jordan, is because I actually had that happen to me. I walked in carelessly into a scene in Atlanta back in the 90s. It was on a Memorial Day. I was working by myself. I had 5 other cases that were going on at the same time. I knew this lady had a heart problem, and I just assumed that she was laid out on her sofa in a nightgown, very clean, well-dressed, no signs of forced entry. Rolled her over, pulled up her nightgown, and her lungs were actually visible through her rib cage. That's how big these knife wounds were, and there was no blood. You know why? The perpetrators had taken her body stripped her initial clothes, cleaned her, redressed her, and laid her on the sofa. And it was only by the grace of God that I rolled that body over at that time and looked at it, because, in a lot of these cases where you don't have coroners that go out at all, they'll just simply send a funeral home out there to pick up the body, take the body to the funeral home with no examination whatsoever. The body is essentially embalmed, put into a casket, and buried, and people get away with these things. And I was haphazard, and it really jumped up and bit me, and we wound up getting a conviction on that case, but it wasn't because I was a big help. I almost screwed the case up, and it turned out that it was a local prostitute and her pimp, and this little old lady lived in a trailer right by the airport, the Hartsfield International Airport, that huge airport in Atlanta, and her son was a cabbie, and he came by to check on her at lunch, and they killed her because she was the little old lady that everybody in the community thought kept money in her mattress. You know what I'm talking about? That there's always that one old person in the neighborhood where people think that they have money stored away, and you can get burned. And the whole purpose of this article that I wrote was to raise the awareness of where we live nowadays, the world that we live in. We still have 24 states in the United States that still have coroners, and some of these people are really good people, Jordan. They're great people, but they have no training, they have no education, and the state doesn't provide the training. And these are the people that are making some of the most difficult decisions of any public servant that's out there. They're signing death certificates, and they don't know what they're doing. Many times they don't have the resources, they're not funded, and it's a very dangerous situation that we've been in for a number of years.
Okay, let's go to back to the Jodi Arias as we go over your top 5. Here's the timeline. Yeah. Let's go back in time. Jodi Arias.
Anderson Cooper is keeping them honest. AC 360, CNN weeknights, 8 Eastern.
There's some very graphic details woven through this case, which may be too explicit for younger viewers.
Travis Alexander never had a chance. 27 stab wounds, a gunshot to the face, his throat slit ear to ear. When friends found his body, he'd already been dead 5 days.
He's dead. He's in his bedroom.
Okay.
In the shower.
So that there's blood. So is it coming from his head? Did he cut his head?
It's all over the place.
Has he been threatened by anyone recently?
Yes, he has. Okay. He has an ex-girlfriend that's been bothering him and following him and slashing tires and things like that.
That ex-girlfriend is Jodi Arias, now on trial for murdering Travis Alexander back in 2008. She's facing the death penalty. This case has court watchers riveted, not only because of the sheer brutality of it, but also because of the couple's salacious sexual relationship. They videotaped themselves having sex and took provocative photos. On the day of the murder, June 4th, 2008, the two snapped naked photos of each other at Alexander's home, right before the killing. Those pictures were recovered from the memory card of a digital camera police found in his washing machine. According to investigators, a photo taken at 1:40 p.m. shows Arias posing nude on Alexander's bed. Later, at 5:22 p.m., a photo was taken and deleted, showing Alexander naked in the shower. Then at 5:30 p.m., another photo of Alexander. Police say just 2 minutes later, he was dead. 5:32 p.m., this time-stamped photo shows Alexander's body on the shower floor. What exactly happened that night is still unclear, in part because investigators can't get a straight or at least consistent story out of Arias. The first time she was questioned, July 15, 2008, Arias said she wasn't with Alexander the day he died. This was before she knew investigators had pictures putting her at the crime scene. Listen.
I was nowhere near Mesa. I was nowhere near Phoenix.
Then, after police matched a bloody handprint at the scene to Arias and told her of the photos they'd found, she told a different story, this time a home invasion.
You didn't run to the neighbors. You didn't try calling. You knew they were in his house.
I was really scared. I was really freaked out of my mind.
Okay. I don't believe you.
2 years later, in 2010, yet another story. Yes, she says, she did kill Travis Alexander, but it was self-defense. Her lawyer is making the case for domestic violence.
Jodi believed that Travis was going to kill her. Travis left Jodi no other option but to defend herself.
As Arias tells it, it all started with those naked pictures. She testified that while she and Alexander were snapping photos, she dropped the camera and Alexander got incredibly angry. So this time, she says, she grabbed the gun she knew Alexander kept in his closet.
I grabbed the gun. I ran out of the closet. He was chasing me. I turned around and we were in the middle of the bathroom. I pointed it at him with both of my hands. I thought that would stop him. If someone were pointing a gun at me, I would stop. But he just kept running. He got like a linebacker. He got kind of low and grabbed my waist. But before he did that, as he was lunging at me, the gun went off. I didn't mean to shoot him.
But what about the knife and those dozens of stab wounds? Arias told the court she simply can't remember how that happened.
Once you broke away from him, what do you remember?
Almost nothing for a long time.
Do you remember stabbing Travis Alexander?
I have no memory of stabbing him.
The couple first met back in 2006 at a convention in Las Vegas. She was an aspiring photographer. He was a salesman and motivational speaker who was active in the Mormon church. They started dating a few months later, even though he lived in Mesa, Arizona, and she lived hours away in California. Arias soon converted to Mormonism like her boyfriend and agreed to be baptized. On the day of her baptism, she told the court, Alexander tied her up while they were both still wearing sacred garments, then forced her to have anal sex.
After this encounter on this spiritual day, how did you feel about yourself?
I didn't feel very good. I kind of felt like a used piece of toilet paper.
Arias claims Alexander often abused her physically and sexually, but on the couple's phone sex tapes, played in court, she seemed to be enjoying herself.
The way you know that it sounds like you was 12-year-old girl having her first orgasm. It's so hot.
How things turned from phone sex to this is still a mystery, but investigators say there's no question Travis Alexander suffered. The medical examiner says he was stabbed first, then shot, so it may have taken him some time to die. Crime scene photos show his hands bruised and bloodied, which may indicate he struggled to fight off his attacker, who was stabbing him. In court today, under cross-examination, the prosecutor did his best to expose Jodi Arias as a cold-blooded killer and shatter her account of what happened the night Alexander was killed.
Other than you, who would be sure about your statements?
God.
Well, God's not here. We can't subpoena him, right?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Are you sure that we can? Because it seems like you're leaving the door open for that.
No matter how hard prosecutors come at her, Jodi Arias has stuck to her story. Before the trial, she spoke to Inside Edition from jail.
No jury is going to convict me.
Why not?
Because I'm innocent, and you can mark my words on that one. No jury will convict me.
Later in court, she said that was because she planned to kill herself first. Randy Kay, CNN, New York.
Wow, that brings back total memories with the Jodi Arias case a couple of years back. Just big almost, as OJ, sex, had sex, crime, and photography. And we're here with death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan. Now, Joseph, the camera that was used as part of the evidence, you know, that wasn't originally meant for prosecution and the investigators to see. That was a mistake by Jodi. And, you know, I was thinking about if they didn't have that evidence placing her at the scene, God knows what would happen with that case. That was a key piece of evidence. What's your thoughts?
It really was, Jordan. I'm glad you brought that up. It was that was kind of the key that unlocked the door, you know, because I'm no psychiatrist, but she's always impressed me as somebody that has she's sociopathic almost. She's a cold fish.
Yes.
And what's really telling is that she never wavered. You could hear during that testimony she was so cold, and she could turn things on and off really easily. And that camera, she's dead to rights at that point. She's got some splaining to do, as they say. And what amazes me is that they were actually able to go back in and take those degraded photos that were on that chip, on that disc, and bring those back to life. And boy, did they have a tale to tell when they popped up.
Right. I mean, if you think about it, without those pictures, you don't have her at the scene. I mean, you could place her actually with some blood, but with those pictures that she did not mean to have there, it was just a good job with the camera. But without those pictures, it's less of a slam dunk, I would say. It still was a good case for the prosecution, but nonetheless, those pictures did come into play. I couldn't believe how they captured poor Travis in the shower right before he was going to leave this earth.
That's really telling. And there's a great piece of footage, if you guys can go onto YouTube and check it out, and it's me and Ryan Smith. You guys remember Ryan Smith? Ryan Smith
ABC
is one of the
News
really
now,
good
yes.
guys. If you ever have an opportunity, he is a kind soul, and I have nothing but good things to say about him. He is a good man. And Ryan and I reenacted this thing in the shower where he was actually Travis, and I demonstrated in the shower. We went through this thing step by step, and I imagine, the thing about it for me that I imagine is that I always think about the Tasmanian Devil when I think about her, because she attacked him with such ferocity, and those stab wounds that he had in his back, that's where she first struck. That last image is really telling. I don't know if you guys remember it, but the one where Travis is in the shower and he's looking over his right shoulder, that's the last image that you see of Travis in life. And it was right after that she took that knife and she started burying this thing in his chest over and over and over. Now, these are not lethal blows, but they were enough, not lethal in the short term, but they were enough to penetrate him to the point where she nicked his lung at some point in time. He comes out of the shower, and she's retreating at this point. There is no gun in her hand at this point. And he goes over to the sink, puts his hands on the sink, and he looks in the mirror, Jordan. That's what's so compelling about this. And he had this fine aspirate spray. He actually blew blood that was almost like a histamine, like you're using an aerosol sprayer. And we see this a lot with lung injuries. Then he crawled down the hallway, and she is still tormenting him at this point till he gets to the end of the hallway, and she takes that knife. And let me tell you what happens at that point. I think she put her knee in his back, grabbed him by his chin, retracted his neck, and took that blade and drug it across his neck because he's got this gaping, and I mean gaping, neck injury where she cut his throat. And the gunshot wound that she was going on about, that gunshot wound, the trajectory of that thing, whoever did that was standing, she did it. She was standing above him, and when she shot him, it was from, if I remember correctly, it was from left to right, diagonally, and it went from above to below, and it tracked across his eyes. And this is the telling part, and this is how I know she was lying. In the autopsy report, when you read Travis Alexander's autopsy report, there is no hemorrhage in the wound track for that bullet. And what that means is that his heart was not beating. And it didn't just end there. After she did that, she dragged this man all the way back down the hallway and stuffed him back into the shower. And that's where they got these bloody handprints from. She's trying to balance herself on the wall as she's this little girl, and she's tiny. She's dragging him back down the hallway. This is a horrific scene, but it was rich with forensic evidence.
It really was, and they went to they got the guilty verdict, and then when they got to the sentencing, they had a hung jury, but they came back a second pair of juries. I believe it was the infamous Juror 17 that would not give the final death with Jodi Arias, and there's so many bad crimes out there that you cover, and we see if any case people say deserves the death penalty, it would have been Miss Jodi Ann Arias. Would you agree?
Yeah. I'd have to say it. I'm not as big a fan at this point in my life of the death penalty as I used to be, because it seems like a waste of time at this point. It takes so long, and also I'm less inclined now in my older age and having seen a lot of stuff. There's so many people now that have been convicted on bad evidence that I would be terrified, I think, at this point, that you're sending somebody to die and the evidence might not be thorough. I mean, the reason I'm saying this is because the advent of DNA now, where we have all these people being released from jail, and it's kind of a scary proposition to me. But that aside, I think the thing that kind of left me dumbfounded on the trial side, because, keep in mind, I'm no attorney. But when I think about our mutual friend, Dwayne, out there in Phoenix, I was fascinated. I'd love to hear him comment, and he probably has in the past, but about how the sentencing phase worked. It was because it was unlike anything else I'd ever seen, in the courts.
Yes.
And it was just, and even I remember then, even Vinnie Politan and those guys, talking all set about this. They were like, this is amazing, the way they handle these trials out in Arizona. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's completely different from what we're used to. And that it just took so long to get this done. And how much access the press was allowed to her was just amazing, too.
It'll go down in history as like an OJ type deal. And, I think there was just as much evidence. But wow, I don't think people will ever forget the Jodi Arias case. Another interesting case that you covered is the Trey Zwicker case, I believe, a 14-year-old who was killed. They said the prosecutor said their stepfather, Josh, used his son also, but the son was acquitted. Now, I actually have sound that believe you're on this cut from a few years ago with Ryan Smith, and then you'll talk about it on this cut, and then we'll get more into it. So here's the sound from HLN 2013, I believe.
A lot of times in trials like the Joshua Young trial, jurors will get really connected with the physical evidence. There's not a lot of it here, but one thing that's critical, how did Trey Zwicker die? How will that play into this? Was he beaten with a blunt object like a bat? Or was it a sharp object like a knife? The truth is we may never know exactly what happened to him, but his autopsy gives us some clues that could help the jury convict Joshua Young or set him free. Earlier I spoke to Joseph Scott Morgan. He's a forensic sciences professor at the University of Georgia. Tell us about the difference between a sharp force injury and a blunt force injury.
Let's take a look at this very quickly. As we see right here, we've got a tomato. This side of it represents smooth, pristine skin, as we would see, without a bruise on our skin. But if we rotate this tomato around, we can see this kind of insulted area here that's soft and bruised, and we can all identify with this in a tomato or an apple. But if we take this, turn it back around to the untapped side, we take a knife, we apply it, and we draw it across the surface of the tomato just like this. As we can see, this gap opens up, and there's nothing connecting it. It's completely smooth. We have what are referred to as defined margins right here. There's nothing connecting it. This is what we get when we have a sharp force injury take place.
You know, officers talked about how a lawnmower blade was found at the scene. Could a lawnmower blade cause that kind of injury? Because they never tested it.
Absolutely. The thing that you have to think about a lawnmower blade is that the blunt leading edge, or the blunt side of the blade itself, is very, very heavy. Remember, she talked about something that was heavy with a sharp edge. It has to have the force to be able to drive through the tissue and separate it, parting it, making it wide open. This is what we're seeing here.
Okay, could have caused that injury, but again, never tested. So let's take a look at the body. Joseph, how do you think Trey Zwicker died?
I'll tell you what, let's take a look at the diagram real quick.
Okay.
Here we have, this is from the actual autopsy, Ryan. We have these parallel lines that are running right here where the doctor is attempting to demonstrate this large area of contusion or bruising as we know it. Now, what this is indicative of, this was not just created by one blow, but multiple blows to the back. We have here a dummy that's representing a human form. We can take, say for instance, a blunt instrument like this bat. Now, keep in mind, these injuries run diagonal to the shoulders. So what's going to happen is that there's got to be a striking motion that comes down on the shoulders repeatedly, over and over again. Now, as you can see, as I'm striking this, I'm not moving my base. I'm not moving my feet, just simply my arms coming down over it. Now, if I were to try to move about, the position of this thing would change. As we can see back here in the diagram, it doesn't really change. We've got the same pitch, the same angle. These are all diagonal. They're running parallel, and this big area of contusion is being created here by repeated strikes.
But could the ME tell whether or not it was a bat or a pole, like Josh Gauker said?
Well, you know, I don't know. I think that's questionable. I think that if there were some kind of, say if we had a pipe that had threading on it where it was driven into the back and that left an impression, quite possibly. But if we're dealing with smooth surfaces, Ryan, we're dealing with smooth surfaces, whether they're metal or whether they're wooden or aluminum.
Describe for us how you then think Trey Zwicker was, what position he was, what was happening with him at the moment that he died.
This is where it gets really, really sad. Not that it's not sad enough already, but we have a young boy here that is in a horrible state. He's been desperately debilitated at this point, and he's laying in an area that's just mud-covered, wet, nasty, and he's face down, Ryan. He's debilitated. He's not able to breathe really well. And now he very well might be unconscious, but his last moments on this earth, his last moments in life are spent in the mud, inhalating this, and this led to positional asphyxia. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He suffocated to death.
Okay, that was definitely a very interesting trial, the Joshua Young trial back in 2013, and you did a good job there, Joseph. Now they also wanted to prove that the father made, at the time, this 14-year-old worked in concert. Now, he was acquitted, and I only thought, I don't know if he definitely, helped him or whatnot, but just from, forget about legal perspective, I don't think it was in his heart. I just think it was just fault. If he did it, I was just thinking he was just going along with his top team. It's not the same as, being in your 20s or 30s. Your mental state, you're just following your father. So I think the jury got that right. I don't know about what you felt about that one.
Yeah, I tell you, Jordan, this case really plucked at my heartstrings. I came from not too dissimilar background from this 14-year-old boy, and it just really churned in my gut the entire time I was working on this thing with Ryan and with Vinny. We covered it for some time. The big question was this only the stepfather that was perpetrating this thing, or was it the stepbrother involved in it as well? And one of the things that was never clearly delineated in this case was the fact that he had evidence of being struck not just with a blunt object, which was a bat or a pipe, but also that aforementioned lawnmower blade that was out there. He had clear-cut evidence on his body that he had been struck with something that had a sharp leading edge on it. I feel as though that the ME did not do a sufficient job in describing this in the court, and she was questioned about this and never really cleared this up. Essentially what you have here is also a group of people entering into a conspiracy. It's not just the stepfather and the stepbrother, but it's also a cousin who helped them dispose of evidence. And then, of course, this mother, Trey's mother, who was involved with the stepfather that's just this horrible, several-time loser guy. He's a drug dealer. He's if you see the video of him and listen to him talk, he's very brash. He even comes across as very abrasive, yes, and very, very arrogant on stand. And there's quite a bit of footage of this guy. And it's one of these things where you just, as a dad like I am now, I just kind of want to reach through the screen and grab this guy, by his throat. But it really tugged at my heartstrings. And I think the thing about it is that where he was found, his body, for those that aren't clear, this was up in Kentucky. His body was found in this kind of swampy-like area, full of muck and mud and that sort of thing. And he was, in fact, face down. And what was so pitiful about the situation is that they left this poor little 14-year-old boy there in the woods all by himself, and he died, sucking in this filthy, filthy swamp water. And that's how his life ended. And it was, this case kind of summed up to me how many people in this world will treat some of the most defenseless people in this world just like they're a piece of garbage and throw them away. And I think that that's why this case for me, when you asked me to compile this list, this case was one of the most impactful for me personally, because I could just imagine what this poor boy went through out there in those woods.
Oh, yeah. Done by a, quote, family member was just brutal.
Yeah,
brutal
somebody
indeed.
that you would commonly think that would love and care for you, and in the end, he probably would have been taken. He would have been better off just being dumped off at a bus station, and would have had better care taken of him.
It's sad how certain people in this world have literally no conscience and no heart. To do that,
they don't.
You can't have a conscience.
No, you really can't. And it's interesting. The first two people that we talk about as perpetrators in the situation in these cases, are real. The leading actors are real sociopaths, and they're stone cold.
No question about it. Okay, let's go back to the Blade Runner, Oscar Pistorius. Here's some sound from that, and we'll talk on the other side.
So many eyes on Oscar Pistorius, the Blade Runner, as he's called, on trial tomorrow for the shooting death of his girlfriend. Was it murder? Tonight, new images of Pistorius and his girlfriend caught on tape a little more than a week before her death. ABC's Hamish McDonald is in South Africa for us tonight.
That final deep breath before it begins. Oscar Pistorius is no stranger to big moments. Tomorrow may be his biggest. He'll enter the courtroom accused of murdering his model girlfriend. He faces a possible life sentence.
This is probably the biggest trial of the century, certainly so far it is.
The prosecution alleges Pistorius shot Reva Steenkamp through a locked bathroom door during an argument. Images emerged this week of Pistorius on a gun range, shooting the same pistol. It'll be claimed he was reckless and gun-happy. But there is evidence too, just 10 days before the killing, of a flirtatious and loving couple. The world will be watching. A dedicated cable channel has been launched just to cover these proceedings.
But that tension between this almost godlike character and the awful tragedy is something that no one can resist.
Pistorius claims he thought an intruder was in the home, that he acted in self-defense. ABC's 2020 built a replica of the crime scene to examine crucial evidence from the bathroom where Steenkamp was found.
Prosecutors say, what were two cell phones doing there?
It would imply an argument.
She just got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and somehow brought two cell phones with her to leave outside the toilet? They say it doesn't make any sense at all.
The trial is set down for 3 weeks, but the prosecutors alone are calling more than 100 witnesses, so it's widely expected to run much longer. Right up until the final moments before this trial, prosecutors have been waiting on help from the United States to unlock crucial data encrypted on Pistorius' iPhone. They now have that and say they're confident of securing a guilty verdict. David?
Hamish McDonald there on the scene every step of the way for us. Hamish, thank you.
This was a very huge trial indeed that ultimately got changed. And this had not only America, but South America. You had a young sports star a la O.J. Simpson with a very pretty better half, a la Anna Nicole, Nicole Simpson, and very some similarities here, but you don't have like O.J. There was stuff where he beat her up. This was just weird, especially as Dan Abrams pointed out with 2 cell phones there in the bathroom, and a whole lot of head scratching from just a normal person just looking at this from an unbiased standpoint. Would you agree, Joseph Scott?
Yeah, and again, this is one of these cases where just from a procedural standpoint, watching the case and the trial, it's so literally and figuratively, it's so foreign to us, here in America, because it's a completely different way of doing things. What I was struck by from a forensic standpoint was, it came down to it at the end of the day, and I'm not trying to be arrogant or in any way in saying this, but the police did not do a very good job. I'll put it to you that way, in securing the scene, which is a big deal, and protecting the continuity of the evidence that was contained, because this is a very complex case. You've got all kinds of bullet trajectories that have to be figured out. You've got blood spatter. There is a classic photo of the bathroom where she was deceased in, and Jordan, it is there is blood smeared all over this place. There's blood all over the toilet. There's blood on the walls, on the floor. And you have to be able to try to interpret what is actually blood spatter and what is, say, blood leakage, if you will, to put it in simple terms, where she bled out. The door was blasted through, so the entrance wound the entrance area on the outside of the door is smaller than it passes through the wooden door. Well, as it passed through the door, just so that the people at home will understand that are listening, the door was made out of wood, guys, and so those little shards of wood became like little miniature projectiles, and they actually entered her body as well. So she not only had these bullets that struck her, she had these little shards of wood. Now, I got to tell you something please don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to be disrespectful in any way. But I had one of those odd little things happen to me on this case, and it's one of the reasons I gave you this case as one of my that kind of drove my interest. When we were in studio discussing this before I was to go on air, they said, the producer said, okay, now we're trying to demonstrate here whether he was wearing his prosthetic legs or whether or not he was on his stumps. And we had a discussion that lasted, it must have been about 30 minutes, on whether or not we could actually use the term stumps on TV, because We didn't know if it was going to be insensitive or if it was going to be taken the wrong way. And I said, listen, I'm not saying the word stump on national TV as it applies to a guy that uses prosthetic legs. And as it turned out, we actually had a recording of him referring to his stumps, and he referred to these over and over again. And interestingly enough, I know we're kind of up against time, but interestingly enough, when it came down to the sentencing phase, and this was, remember, this thing went back to court not too long ago, and they had video of him in court, and he had to get up in court on his stumps. I don't know if any of you guys saw this at home, and actually demonstrate how he would have to stand on his stumps without his prosthetics, and he started crying in court. And that was a very powerful thing. But with this case at Jacksonville State University, where I work at the Center for Applied Forensics, we did our own reconstruction of the scene as well. I think those images can be found on my Facebook page. If you dig through there, we had images that we had recreated on our own, and we shot through a bathroom door approximating both his height without his prosthetics on his stumps and with his prosthesis on, because, you know, he was, with the prosthetic legs on, he was 6'2", and there was a lot of confusion in this case as to whether or not he had his legs on or not, or his prosthetics on when this occurred.
Yeah, and it was interesting how they changed the verdict, as they frequently do in other countries. Our Amanda Knox was changed, I think, about 3 or 4 times. Right. And the Blade Runner originally got a light sentence, but very then a higher judge gave him a much stronger conviction, which I think will keep him in there for at least 20 years, at least. Probably more, but I just don't have to. Yeah, keep him there for a while. And there's no question in my mouth, in my opinion, that he did wrong. I mean, this story doesn't add up. She's in the house. He thinks it's an intruder, so you're going to kill the intruder while she's screaming. There's just too many head scratching, you know. Even if you got the forensic science in place, and, you know, of course, his team said that there's no way he could have did it, or it was an accident, and all kinds of theories came up. But at the end of the day, if you just use your common sense, in my opinion, that is, I think he is guilty of sin. But, you know, at the end of the day, only God knows the real truth, and that he'll be the judge one day. Yeah. But let's get into one of the trials that happened earlier this year. It happened, actually, in 2014 when his father, Justin Ross Harris, decided to leave his son there. Now, the prosecution contended that this was no accident, and this was intention, and here's the background story to the hot car death trial.
Father on trial for murder, accused of intentionally leaving his son to die in the backseat of a hot car. The jury hearing the prosecutor's opening statements on Monday. Now the defense is set to make its case. ABC's Steve Osunsami has the story.
Prosecutors this morning are painting an ugly picture of Justin Ross Harris, the father accused of leaving his son to die in a hot SUV on a summer day 2 years ago.
There's no doubt the defendant is responsible for Cooper's death. Messaging on the morning of the murder that he needed an escape from his son.
In their opening statements, they question how he could forget to drop the boy off at daycare that morning, especially after the two had breakfast at this Chick-fil-A restaurant down the street, just minutes away from both the daycare and his office where the boy died. 22-month-old Cooper Harris was trapped in a rear-facing car seat for more than 7 hours. This surveillance video shows his father checking on the car in the middle of the day. Police say while his son was dying outside, the married father was sexting with other women.
Defendant's own words show that he's guilty. I love my son and all, but we both need escape.
Harris is charged with murder and second-degree child cruelty. He's pleading not guilty, saying this was an accident. His ex-wife agrees he's innocent. Her lawyer says the sexting doesn't make him a murderer.
I've never believed this showed motive. I believe it just shows bad character. Texting somebody is not a negligent act.
Witnesses who saw him pull into this parking lot after discovering his son's body on his way home from work say he looked genuinely upset.
He kept saying, "What have I done? What have I done?"
But prosecutors are saying that was for show.
Since the death of Cooper Harris in 2014, dozens of children have died in hot cars. It's become a national issue. Defense attorneys give their opening statements, Robin, this morning.
I know you'll be there, Steve. Thank you.
So, Joseph, you definitely been covering this from the get-go. Give me some of the things that really stood out with this trial and conviction, and some of the the investigations you did on this case.
Okay, I think probably ultimately for me, Jordan, one word kind of sums this up, and that's selfishness. Ultimately, and I know that that's a huge moral judgment, but when I began to dig into this thing and then went out and drove the route with one of the reporters from CNN, and we videotaped this thing and started talking about this, a real picture began to form in my mind of what Cooper went through. Because it was an absolute hellish nightmare. This is one case where I cannot sing the praises of the law enforcement community enough, and also the forensic people that worked on this case. They went to great lengths to cover all of their bases at the scene. They went back very, very quickly and began doing heat studies out there with pretty sophisticated equipment, so that you could paint this picture. It's I teach my students at Jacksonville State the idea that not only are they crime scene investigators eventually someday, but they're also historians. They're capturing a moment in time when they're at a scene that will be lost forever, and it's up to them to document it. In this case, the Cobb County Police Department in Cobb County, Georgia, did a fantastic job of capturing the narrative. And another thing about their investigators is that a lot of the media tried to prod the police department and the investigators every way they could to try to get them to release information. These people kept their mouth shut and worked the case. You didn't have a bunch of leaks that were coming out. And boy, when they got this thing in court, it was a slam dunk. I mean, there was no doubt at the end of the day what was going to happen to him. I was, as the trial progressed, I went to local television channel with Vinny, where he works, Channel 11 in Atlanta, WXIA, and we covered this thing. He covered it from gavel to gavel, just like the old days with Court TV. And as it progressed, there was just this feeling, that because we watched every moment of the trial, and some of you guys in the audience I know watched it online, and it was just palpable. You could just tell that the momentum was building, and they did, the prosecution just had an ironclad case, the way they presented it. There was just, it was really, really difficult to defend this guy. They could not make him likable in any way. He came across as like I said earlier, very, very selfish. He was out for his own, I think in my estimation, for his own pleasure. He put the needs of that precious little angel way, way, way to the back of the line, and put his needs, those really base primal needs he was seeking, they took the forefront, and ultimately, he might think he's paying a price right now. What he's paying a price for right now is nothing, and I mean nothing compared to what little Cooper went through.
Yeah, and we had some people here that thought it was crazy that the ex-wife testified in the manner that she did. You followed it probably much more than I did. What did you make of the wife's testimony? Did you believe it? Did you think some of it was from her heart? What do you think about that one?
I got to tell you, they're not the only one that was thinking this, and I won't say who else, but there are other people that I know that were thinking that at some point in time they may come back and try to charge her, and I don't know if that will happen or not. I had a real hard time believing it. To me, she didn't come across. I think I was just jaded and tainted early on by the video that I saw, her reaction to being told that her child had died, and she was very flippant about it, and that it really put me off. And so I don't know that I'm the best person to judge, to tell you the truth, because I was prejudiced by just what I heard her say, her reaction to this, and it just did not. And I know everybody reacts to death in different ways. Trust me, I've made over 2,000 death notifications in person. I've seen a lot of stuff, but the way she reacted, in my opinion, was not consistent with what I would consider a sweet, loving mother would react. I have visions, Old Testament visions of people ripping their clothes and pulling their hair out and covering themselves with ashes, and I didn't see anything like that presenting from her. As a matter of fact, she came off as kind of being flippant about it, like, oh, well, he's gone, yeah, it just sounds like something that Ross would do, he forgot him, and it just sat poorly with me.
It was very a matter of fact when you're saying when she first told investigators.
Yes, yeah, it was when she was initially notified. It was she made some kind of, and I'm not directly quoting, but it was something to the effect, "Oh, well, that sounds like something Ross would have done." When she found out that her son had been left in the car and had died, and I was dumbfounded.
Wow.
I really was. You could have knocked me over with a feather. And so that's why, to me, it didn't smell right to me. But I'm not on the jury. I'm just a college professor and a former death investigator. That's all I am. And, that and $1.50 will get me a cup of coffee at Waffle House. So there you go.
Waffle House is a very good place. Last time I've been there, but that's a topic for another day. Okay, you did have one final story that I couldn't get a hold of, but I read up a little bit. I do believe it's Russell and somebody named Shirley Derman, a son of Slain, something like that. It's just mystery story that was your final story. Is that the story that you were alluding to?
Wow. I'm having a hard time remembering that one, Jordan. But do
you remember the story? That last story?
The Drummond case. Vinny and I covered this. This is the Drummond case, and I'll tell you why this case is so fascinating. This case occurred in an area that's referred to. It's Eatonton, Georgia, but it's on this really, really fancy lake. It's not a fancy lake. It's just a lake that has fancy houses around it. Imagine, if you will, you're up in New York. Imagine somebody that has really nice houses up in the Finger Lakes area, okay? Very posh. Tiger Woods goes and plays at a golf course up there. They have a world tournament up there. It's a secured neighborhood. This couple, this old couple, they're retired. This man was actually originally from Jersey. They had come down, retired down there, And the curious thing about it, this is in Putnam County, Georgia. If people want to check this case out, it's the Drummonds. When the people arrived at the home there on Lake Oconee, they found the body of the elderly man, and he was headless. And let me repeat that. He was headless. His head, still to this day, has not been found. The wife was missing. There was no sign of anybody coming into the house. They would have had to pass through a secured, and I'm talking about a tight security gate. So the only access that you have to this house is by boat. Her body was found almost 2 miles away, floating outside of the main channel of the lake in an isolated area. And still to this day, no one has solved this case. Vinnie Politan did a show called Georgia Mysteries, and we covered this case on that particular program. And the FBI has been involved in this thing. The rural coroner up there, the rural sheriff up there has sworn that if it's the last thing that he ever does, he's going to solve this thing. But to this day, this remains a complete mystery. They've talked about a son who had a drug history. They've talked about that. They've wondered if there was some kind of organized crime connection that had originated in the Northeast, where somebody came down and to exact vengeance on this guy, possibly friends of the son or acquaintances of the son. And still to this day, to the best of my knowledge, they don't have any fresh leads on this thing. But the name of the case is the Drummond case. It's in Putnam County, Georgia, on Lake Oconee. And it's easily accessed. People that are listening in the audience can certainly find information out about this. And what we're really lacking right here is the autopsy report has never been released. So we don't have a lot of information to go on. So from a media standpoint, we're kind of walking around in the dark. And I appreciate why the cops have done that. They don't want to show their hand. But this is an absolutely fascinating case. It's something that if they ever do make an arrest, it's going to be a whale of a story to hear. That's for sure.
Okay, we have a caller waiting for a while. Our friend is from Virginia. Her name is Mary. She says hello. And good evening, Mary, and thank you for calling to the King Jordan Radio, and thank you for holding. You're on with Joe and myself.
Hi, Jordan. Good evening, and hi, Joseph. How are you guys?
Hey, Mary. How are you? How are Virginia?
Doing good. Just been really busy, but I didn't want to miss, talking to you guys tonight. It's been like going down memory street with all the cases from the last year.
Absolutely.
Just kind of, I heard you talk about Nancy Grace and her. I'm going to check out her web, and it seems like since Court TV died, it apparently, what happened is that social media took over to continue the fact that we all support, watching trials and being informed about crimes. And, I myself have a group, and many people have trial groups because the interest is so tremendous on these cases. And we don't have Court TV. However, we usually do get the streams that we can watch it live on our computers. So, that's really interesting. And I wanted to ask Joseph about autopsies. How can sometimes you get two experts, and autopsies is supposed to be science, right? for
Right.
the most part, and then dependent on how it was collected and everything. But, how is it that sometimes you can have two medical examiners or whatever you call them give completely different, results on how the death occurred or, things like that? I've seen it in so many trials.
Okay, it's a great question, Mary, and let me answer it this way. Logic is a very slippery slope into oblivion and into perjury, if you will. Okay, and you walk a very, very fine line. Now, you're absolutely right when you say that a medical legal autopsy is, in fact, it is science, and it's supposed to be objective science. It's almost like we're on a journey and we're trying to get from point A to point B, and this might be oversimplistic, but let's imagine the autopsy is in fact a journey to a destination. You will have two separate people that are expert drivers, and what one guy says or one gal says is that, well, I want to go this way because I believe that this is the best and most efficient route, and this is the benefit of this route. The other person says, no, I want to go this way. Either way, it gets you to the same point. But the problem is that the points vary when you get to the end of it, and they arrive at different conclusions. The trick is, can you back your conclusion up with hard science? And most of the time, they will try to leave wiggle room in there, because if they start to speak in absolutes, that's when they can run the risk of perjuring themselves on the stand. And it hasn't happened a lot, but it can. And many times it leaves a real sour taste in the mouths of people that are prosecutors. For instance, when they have one forensic pathologist comes in from another jurisdiction and renders an opinion on behalf of the defense, first off, the prosecution doesn't want that to happen. And they will try to paint that defense expert as, let me see if I can keep this clean, as a prostitute, okay, as a forensic prostitute. You hear that term many times. But, in this country, I think my friend Alex Sanchez would agree, in this country, we have a right to make an appropriate defense. And it's their job to offer alternatives. They can offer an alternative, but when they offer that alternative, they have to understand they're going to be cross-examined by the prosecution, and they have to keep it within the boundaries of science. And it's a tough, it's a tough road to hoe, because I tell you, if you get up there and you perjure yourself, you've ruined your career. You've absolutely ruined your career. Not, and not to mention you wind up with pretty hefty criminal charges as well. Right.
Yeah, because sometimes, you see cases where they're completely different, what one says and the other, and then the media will say, or commentators will say, well, they hired this guy for that, and to give a difference and give a reasonable doubt to the jury that it could have happened that way rather than this way. So.
And it is about reasonable doubt, and that's what these people are trying to implant into the mind of the jury is reasonable doubt. That's part of making a defense. And and I refer back to the idea of the Cousin Vinny movie, where he gives that great description where he says, the house that the prosecution has to build is huge and solid. All the defense has to do is knock out one of the foundational stones with reasonable doubt, and the whole house crumbles. And so that's what the defense is about. And at the end, that's what they're trying to do. They're not trying to take down the whole house with huge, overwhelming evidence. They're just trying to insert reasonable doubt to take out one of the foundational stones that makes the whole thing collapse on its own weight.
Right. That's very interesting. I like that analogy very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, well, there's just one comment, which is I think that Jodi Arias is either a psychopath or a sociopath because she was manipulative. She showed she could be very social and completely act differently, but she had a black heart. She had no soul. She had no emotion, and the killing was just kind of like. Like you said, her being small, I did see the autopsy photo of that neck. For her to have had the strength to have cut him the way she did, she was just full of anger and rage, but then she can just turn around and be flippant the next day and like, oh, I'm going to call him and, just say that I haven't heard from him, so I'm going to cover up my steps,
Right.
It just, she never loved him or anything like that. I mean, she just had no emotion towards anything. It was all about her needs and what she wanted out of everything.
Yeah,
so.
And she.
Well, I think she was obsessed with him in a psychotic way.
In a sick
she loved
way.
him, but in a sick way.
Yeah, because it had to be her way, and if it wasn't her way, then she was going to get rid of him.
No question.
Yeah, I'd have to agree, Mary.
Yeah. Okay, well, you both have a nice evening, and enjoyed talking with you guys, and, just hang loose.
Okay,
we
Mary, appreciate the call.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, thanks to Mary also, and thank you, Joseph. This was a very unique show, as you talked about your top 5 cases, and it was fun going down memory lane. Definitely,
yeah,
we'll do it again.
Thank
and
you for the
book.
opportunity you've given me over the past year. Yeah, my book, Blood Beneath My Feet, The Journey of a Southern Death Investigator, and also my university, Jacksonville State University in Jacksonville, Alabama. We have the finest applied forensics program in the country. So check us out, jsu.edu.
Thanks so much, Joseph Scott. We'll speak soon.
Be well. Take care. Good night.
Okay, thank you to the death investigator, Joseph Scott Morgan. Great guest, and it was good going over all those cases. Of course, let me give a shout out to Mary who just checked in. Madeline, Pager, shout out to you. Don't forget this Sunday is a 3-part series on the ID Network. The name of the show is O.J. Innocent, The Missing Evidence, as forensics Dr. Chris Muldahendi, Police Sergeant Derek, and Private Investigator William Deere re-examine the slayings of the Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman case of the People versus O.J., and this will be narrated by Martin Sheen. It will be seen at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on ID Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. It's a 3-parter. It looks good. I will be watching it. I already got my DVR set up for that. As far as a guest, stay tuned to the Facebook pages and the Twitter pages. At King Jordan RAD on Twitter, King Jordan Radio on Facebook. Let's go back to the 80s as it's Throwback Thursday, and we're going to hit you with a Dirty Dancing song, one of my favorites. She's Like the Wind. Good evening, everybody.